Hi, it's Ryder from Hotspotting. There's been quite a lot of media attention today given to the Federal Labor Party's policy on negative gearing and capital gains tax. The Australian newspaper devoted a big chunk of its front page today to the subject. And why is that? Well, because there's been some independent analysis of the likely repercussions of that policy. Now, just to recap, under Bill Shorten's leadership, the Federal Labor Party has announced a policy which has been part of their policy agenda since before the last federal election, where they want to scrap negative gearing on everything except for new housing, and also to halve the discount for capital gains tax, cut it from 50% to 25%. Now, it said at the time of announcing that policy that it was to make housing more affordable. It said that policy would achieve that goal: greater affordability of housing, make it easier for first-home buyers to get into the market. And it also said that the fact that it was scrapping negative gearing for purchase of existing housing but leaving it in place for newly constructed housing would encourage greater building activity and create jobs. So an organisation called Cadence Economics has been commissioned to do some independent economic modelling and analyse what the likely repercussions of that policy would be if Labor was to win the next federal election and implement that policy. And the findings of the Cadence Economics analysis are really starkly different to that's what is claimed by Federal Labor. It says that these policies on negative gearing and capital gains tax would mean up to 42,000 fewer new dwellings being built and up to 32,000 fewer full-time jobs being created in the house building industry. It also says that up to $11.8 billion less building activity is likely to result in considerably less renovation activity as well. In response to the publication of the Cadence Economics report, Master Builders Australia says that this analysis shows that Labor's policy on negative gearing and capital gains tax fails its own test, and it's called upon the ALP to rethink its policies in the light of this new research and also a changed housing market. In other words, they're arguing that now that the booms in Sydney and Melbourne are over, there's been a wind down in those markets, prices no longer rising, and there's some evidence of prices now falling in the major cities, and a sharp reduction in investor activity, as well as actually a rather sharp increase in first-home buyer activities in major markets across Australia, but particularly in Sydney and Melbourne. So suggesting that this policy is not needed because when it was originally announced by Bill Shorten, it was couched in terms that it was going to improve affordability. But at the same time, under the spotlight from media at different times, Bill Shorten has said that this policy won't force down the value of people's homes, and which begs the question, if it's not going to force down property values, then how is it going to improve housing affordability? And the answer is it won't. I believe that this policy has never been about housing affordability or helping first-home buyers. It's been about revenue. It's being about saving revenue in the budget, although I think that long-term it actually costs the federal budget more than it saves, because if we discourage property investment, people will go underfunded into retirement and will cost the federal budget more in pensions, because fewer people will be backed by assets from investing in property. So I think long-term revenue will suffer. One of the things about this particular policy, with all the speculation of what it would mean, what would be the outcome, we actually have a precedent for it, of course, that back when Paul Keating was Treasurer, he scrapped negative gearing. And very quickly, within a year, brought it back in because it had unexpected consequences. Things that he did not foresee were a result of the scrapping of negative gearing. One of the things that happened was that rents in the major cities soared because it discouraged investment in property. The pool of rental properties reduced. and rentals rose. And I'm strongly believe that the same would happen again, particularly in our major cities without those negative gearing tax benefits, with prices being as high as they are in Sydney and Melbourne, and rental yields being as low as they are, without the tax write-offs provided by the negative gearing provisions. Investment in those larger cities is not particularly viable, and as fewer people will do it, there'll be fewer rental properties available, and rents inevitably will rise. But beyond all that, it's interesting that this independent analysis has found that the consequences of these policies will be quite different from what Bill Shorten is claiming. He's claiming that it would actually create home building boom and create jobs. This analysis says it's going to do the opposite. It's actually going to mean fewer dwellings built, fewer jobs created in the building industry, and something like $12 billion less invested in building activity. So, interesting stuff. I think it's a terrible policy. I don't think Bill Shorten's ever been honest about the reasons for wanting this policy. It's got nothing to do with affordability. It's about revenue. By his own admission, it's not going to push down property values, therefore it's not going to help affordability. If politicians actually are genuinely interested in doing something about housing affordability, what they can do is defuse the incredibly high cost of creating new dwellings in this country. And most of the reasons why the cost of creating new dwellings in Australia is so high is because of the actions of the politicians. They all use the housing industry as a cash cow. They milk it for revenue. They impose ever greater taxes, fees and charges on the industry that creates new dwellings. And massive percentage of the cost of a new housing land package in Australia is government taxes, fees and charges at the three levels of government. So if politicians are genuinely interested in doing something about affordability, that's what they can do. Stop taxing this industry to death, speed up the approvals process, do something about the zoning system, which mitigates against density in existing suburbs, which means new housing is forced out to the fringes and becomes very, very costly, and we are unable to achieve affordable dwellings in existing inner and middle ring suburbs. So interesting to see what comes out of the debate that will arise from this analysis. It's certainly got plenty of prominence in media today, and hopefully it will continue to be discussed, because I think that we really do need to have this policy of on negative gearing, capital gains tax just rubbed out. It's not going to help, and we don't need it. That's it for now. Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au signing off. Talk to you again soon.